everyone. I wanted to talk about grief today. So the intention of this video is to share about the complexity of what grief is, the stages of grief. I'd like to highlight a couple pointers of those that are experiencing their own form of grief, and a couple tips for those who are potentially supporting someone in grief, as that can be a difficult thing to do. What I've learned over the last little while is that grief is not solely related to the loss of a loved one through the experience of death. Grief is a far more complicated emotion that many of us carry. It can look like sadness, anger, confusion, guilt. It can also lead people into depression, isolation, and alternatively, it can reflect love. It can provide relief through grief, and it can keep us motivated to moving forward in life and making meaning out of some of our experiences with grief. So there's a lot there. Oftentimes we grieve for people or pets or things that we've lost because it reflects there was a deep sense of connection to something, and also love. Love is really the underlying emotion in grief. So we can grieve the loss of a dream, the loss of our pets, as I mentioned, a career, a miscarriage. We can grieve our health declining, and the loss of the life in the past. We can also grieve the loss of friendships or relationships. Oftentimes we place a lot of expectations on people to be in our lives forever. And so when relationships break or bend, we can grieve over that. We also grieve the natural loss, complicated loss, and sudden death. So what happens in grief is we usually can identify with some, if not all, of the stages of grief. Denial is usually where we start, like, this can't be happening to me, I didn't see this coming. Anger can show up for a lot of people. Why is this happening? Who's to blame for this? We can also fall into bargaining, like, if I'll fight for this relationship, I'm willing to do this, or why is this happening? Make this not happen. Some people will even turn to prayer, or trying to look at what they can give up to try to control the situation. So bargaining's a really big one. Depression's not the same as grief. It's similar but very different. And this is when someone's saying, I'm too sad to do anything. But there's also acceptance is a really important stage of grief. And it's not forgetting or even forgiving. It's being at peace of what happened, or even before that, it's just accepting the loss. And being able to move forward. So what I've learned is that every person's grief has its own trajectory. It's really not linear. And as I support myself through the grief process and also work with other people, I recognize it's very unique to each person. So there's no specific way to process it. My biggest learnings from grief is to find spaces where people feel comfortable talking about it, be willing to unpack emotions, whether it's one or several, and really be open to building some specific strategies to help you process and move through the grief process. Also, some people need permission to experience and explore grief. I work with a lot of men, and oftentimes they're told to just push it away and move forward. And so recognize when you need permission, which is oftentimes through some support, or recognize that other people may need permission to grieve the loss of a job or a health issue that's come up for themselves or someone else. So sometimes we do have to provide that permission to somebody. I think that it's not enough to talk about it and to be aware of our emotions. We have to find a form of movement that can help us to elicit emotions and bring them through our body. So I think like somatic processing can be very important, and I won't spend too much time on that. Another thing that came up for me with some recent grief is confusion. And I actually found that staying in a state of confusion was very dangerous. So my encouragement is try not to do that for too long. Try to allow the confusion to find some facts of the situation. Allow the confusion to hit anger, to hit sadness. Excuse me. Try not to stay there for too long. And don't be ashamed of how you feel. So if you've lost somebody who was very harmful to you, if you're leaving a partnership where someone is in the depths of addiction, don't be ashamed of feeling angry. Don't be ashamed of feeling relief. And don't be ashamed of feeling sadness and other emotions, because like I said, grief is complicated and it's very person dependent. And acceptance can be very difficult to talk about with people. So moving forward, it just suggests that you've accepted the loss, not forgotten about it. In fact, I highly encourage keeping memories, honoring someone or something by holding on to certain things, or for me, it's really important to honor the spirit of the person or pet or thing that's no longer there. So it's what can you take from this experience that you've had with this person or concept, and how can you honor that by moving forward? I recently lost one of my cats, and, I'll do little things to honor his memory, working on a couple creative projects. I also just walk the path that he would walk in my backyard, and that is a way for me to foster like a sense of connection to him. So it's finding these little nuanced ways that make sense to you. Now, if you are a person supporting someone through grief, that can be a complicated situation in itself. My encouragement is to ensure that you have space to listen, ask questions, share memories. Oftentimes people in mourning want to talk about the situation, although we may think otherwise. People supporting someone in grief can validate the difficulty of the loss, leave space for emotions, or you also have permission to set some boundaries. If you don't have capacity to support someone's grief, it's okay to say so, right? And encourage them to find somebody who has a little more space and capacity. So ideally, if you're supporting somebody, you want to confirm the depth and the validity of their grief and their feelings, and this will help them to heal. It was really important for me to, when I lost my cat, to have some people reach out and say, I really loved him, or I remember him sitting at the water bowl often, like what was he thinking about? And so I found that these were nice breaks in my grief where it felt nice to know that he was important to other people too. The other piece that I would say for those supporting someone in grief is don't judge someone else's grief, but you can encourage the concept of closure. So it was very helpful for me recently, and my partner saying, what do you want to do to sort of honor the loss of our cat? And it helped to shift the grief away from the specific depth of the loss. And it actually encouraged me to engage in some creative projects that I'm really excited about, and can help me to sort of move through that process. So that's a lot of information, but I would encourage people to sort of digest. Think about the grief that you're carrying in your life right now. It can be related to a lot of different things, and make some space for it in your life. And if you're having a hard time talking about it, I would encourage you to connect with some support or some supportive people that can help you just to unpack, because we don't want to stay stuck in our grief for too long. That's all for now.